All right. So I'm not supposed to do the serious voice either. Hold on.
Well, no, I just noticed whenever you're like about to speak, you're all of a sudden like like this.
All right, we're continuing our Sun series through the houses in astrology. We covered houses 1, 2, and 3. We're gonna start with number cuatro, 4. Hi, Jay.
Hello. We
Uh,
missed a couple days in between, but back on
yes,
track.
yes, was feeling a little bit under the weather yesterday, but we're back at it to finish this. Should I go over the significations of the sun? Because this is going to be a separate video. Even
Oh,
though
yeah.
I wore the same thing, thinking maybe we'll cut it together, but I think it'll just be too long anyway. So I should just go through the significations of the sun one more time.
4 to 6, right?
Whatever we get to today.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or whatever we get to.
Yeah. So all the planets will always have a key symbol. It's like the root of the tree, and everything else is just stemming out of it. And for the sun, the key signification is the soul. When we go to the branches of this keyword, we get consciousness, self, identity, or self-concept. We get the notion of what it means to have a center of being. The sun also represents our vitality, health. It's a generative planet. It represents the light, daytime, public spaces, visibility, vision, fame, and it also represents stability and reliability. It's also about decisiveness, confidence, authority, government, governance, father, leadership, and our career. So these would be the general keywords, primary keywords for the sun.
And we talked about this in the other video where people use it as father and mother.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know if you want to go over that again or they can
Yeah,
watch the other video.
yeah, I think that was a large portion of the last segment we covered, that it's not the key signification of the sun. I don't want to go through it again. Everyone who's interested, they can just watch part 1 of the sun series through the houses. But yeah, it's not the primary signification for the sun. And if you think about it, if we put father as the key symbol, how do we go from father to soul? And then how do we go from father to consciousness? These are very huge concepts. So that's why we have to understand how this tree works, what's at the head of it, and then what branches out to other symbolism. It actually clarifies things in our mind. So in the last video, we saw that sun is at the helm of its power in the first house, and it was very prominent and positive. In the second house, the sun did well, but it was starting to lose its notion of centrality because now it's becoming about other people. We saw in the third house, the sun also does really well. However, it becomes very self-focused. And from the third house to fourth and fifth, we're moving to the sector of the chart that has to do with the private sphere of our lives, right? And the sun is a very external, extroverted, outmoving, outward acting planet. And the fourth house, it's actually a house that is called below the grounds. It's the most below part of the chart, while the 10th house opposing it is the highest point of the chart and the most visible. And the fourth house becomes a private sphere, a hidden sphere. It's a darker space. So we can see right away that there are some disconnects with the symbolism of the sun, what the sun's trying to do, and what the fourth house accommodate on what its environment is. And another thing to remember, it's for people who are starting in astrology, because we have the eastern horizon, the first house, and then the western horizon, the seventh house. We don't really have the concept of north and south in astrology. So we have the fourth house. So the eastern, I'll put a chart here so you can visually see. So the eastern horizon's in the first house, western horizon's in the seventh house. And when we get to the fourth house, you would assume is the north, but is not, is below, and the 10th house comes to be above.
So basically, when you look at the chart, I was going to ask you, do you use that North Indian style chart mostly?
I use the chakra charts, like the Western astrology, the circular chart,
Okay.
or the northern chart. Yes.
Okay. So the way
And
it's laid.
and for me, I see very different things in different layout of the chart. It's pretty weird how that happens.
Oh, okay. That's what I was going to ask you. I was
Yeah.
going to ask you, is that why the chart is laid out a certain way?
Yeah, I find Indian charts, the North Indian chart, there's something very strategic that happens in my brain with the way I see things. Almost feels like chess pieces on a board. Whereas when I look at the
South
circular chart, not the South Indian, the It's called the chakra chart in India,
Okay.
and then or the Western chart where it's just a circle.
Yeah.
It's more emotion oriented for me. And I've heard other astrologers, when talking to them, they get different kinds of feelings from it too.
Oh, interesting. Really?
Yeah. So like I see the aspects very different in the Indian chart than I do in the circular chart. Very
Oh, wow.
different. Yeah, it's weird. It's a feeling thing. One's
Okay.
cerebral for me, the other one's more feeling oriented.
One's what for you?
Cerebral, it's like
Okay.
playing
Oh,
chess
but yeah,
almost,
yeah.
like looking at all the planets is like,
Strategic and
yeah, in my brain is just like the whole schema of it is just like playing itself out. It's weird.
okay. No, I was just asking because you were talking about how like the fourth house and there's no direct, like, is that seen from that chart? Like
None
the
of
way
the
it's laid
charts
out?
will show you north or south. So it's always going to be
Yeah.
like eastern horizon, western horizon, below, above.
Okay.
So the MC, and then the MC's in the 10th house, and then we got the IC, which is the 4th house. Yeah. All right. So should I give some significations of the 4th house before we start connecting the sun to the 4th house and how it works itself out?
Yes.
Okay, so the primary thing about the 4th house to remember that it's saying something about the internal spaces, the inner spaces. It's a receptive, taking in kind of house. So it's talking about the inner self. It's talking about our emotions. It's talking about our sense of happiness. The 4th house has a lot to do with that particular emotion, that color in the crayon, that's happiness. The 4th house is also a very devotional house, so it has to do with devotion. It has to do with privacy. Anything that we consider as private in life is saying something about the 4th house. It has to do with our private property, land, homeland, ancestry, cultural heritage. It has to do with our roots, where we come from, which is also related to the ancestry. And of course, it's related to our mother or those people or that person who nurtures us, which is that mother archetype. And the 4th house is also a moksha house. So 4th, 8th, and 12th are the moksha houses. They trine each other. So this house, when we talk about this being a moksha house, we can think of, people like to call moksha liberation. Another way to think of moksha is enlightenment. And since this is the house of the inner self or interiority, the way to become enlightened, the way to become liberated from yourself, you have to become enlightened about your internal self and all of its processing. So if you have any kind of self-deceiving mannerisms within, or things that you don't understand about your internal processing, you can't achieve enlightenment. And if you can't do that, you can't be liberated. So the 4th house has a lot to do with that. And I actually want to bring the sun relative to this moksha aspect of this house, because this is one place that the sun is very helpful in the 4th house. Because initially I said that the sun and the 4th house have a lot of dissonance because of the external moving factor of the sun and then the internal movement of the 4th house. But the sun illuminates. The sun makes things visible. The sun is it's about truth because of this illumination. So when the sun comes into the 4th house, the person becomes more apt at having self-realization, understanding their own internal processing and wiring. So this is one way that I personally like the sun in the 4th house. While it creates a lot of challenges for the person in a lot of different ways, over a lifetime, we could say that the sun in the 4th house creates that luminous internal space where the person can see themselves. And this is a very important thing in life. For me personally, it's more important than what you get to know and to see out there. Because when you die, that last breath, everything that you saw and everything you experience out there, you can't take with you. But that thing that you've become, that thing that you know, that's what's going with you. So I like this slant. I wanted to start with something positive in the 4th house, because the sun brings particular challenges in the 4th house. For example, the mother. Let's start with that notion of the mother and the father. The mother is a figure, an archetype that's supposed to care for you, give of themselves. There's nurturance, there's softness, there's receptivity. A mother is supposed to feel you, and make themselves available to you. This is not what the sun does. The sun is an authority figure who's apt at just telling you at just showing you. It's an external planet. It doesn't know how to take in, hold something within, nurture it in that way. It's an externalizing planet. So when the sun comes into the fourth house, it starts to burn out the signification of the mother, which is the nurturing, the caring, the caregiver, that type of a feel that comes in the fourth house. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, like you don't want a mother who's an authority figure in the house. You want a mother who asks you, how does that make you feel? What
Does
is
it
it?
also make a mother like self-absorbed, like it's about her needs instead of the child?
You know, if it's coming with a sign that's also a little bit on the related to the masculine principle, or it's creating a little bit of glitchiness, let's say Mars is casting its gaze or it's conjunct here, then yeah, you can get that kind of a mother here too. Just it's overbearing. This is an overbearing parent. And
Okay.
that scars people rather than feeling like they were nurtured, you know?
Oh, so it's not necessarily egotistical. It could just
No.
be an overbearing parent.
Yeah, like, you know, like a helicopter mom.
Yeah.
You know, it's just, you know, watch movies, there's that parent who's pushing their son to be the best athlete, and the kid doesn't even want to be an athlete, but they're just being led that way.
So is it also that mother who when her son's married, she shows up unannounced and says, "This is my son's house."
You know what? This is actually a good point. You know why? Because this house represents privacy.
Yeah, you know, I know some of those mother-in-laws.
Right? So you want to have there's certain things you want to keep on the inside. The sun will take away that. It'll make certain parts of life that you want them to be held as something sacred and something within, something that's private. Sun could expose it in the fourth house. So if you have like family secrets, you have a sun in the fourth house, it can easily illuminate that, and boof, everyone can see it. That's why in this house, when you have the sun here, is just starting to create light where there is supposed to be dimness and coolness. You don't want hot, and you don't want the space hot and illuminated. Imagine a house that's made of glass at night. It's perfect because you can't see inside the house, you know? But imagine all the lights are lit and you're walking around with your underwear. Everyone can see you in the house, you know? So this is like kind of the effect that the sun has in the fourth house.
So it makes you very vulnerable and exposed.
Makes you, yes, because you want some parts of your interiority to be, these could also be individuals who expose too much of their inner self. There's a time and a place for that, you know, if you can't just do that all the time with certain people, because it actually makes you vulnerable with the wrong people. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you can have these kinds of feelings with the sun. On a positive note, again, with the sun, it can play itself in a difficult way too, but you do see certain people who are the word pride, we usually have an issue with it, but they are proud of their roots, their heritage. You can see a lot of, if you do research, you'll find a lot of generals who have sun in the fourth house. They are working towards the homeland, and they are a kind of a leader in a domain for the protection of the homeland. So you can get these kinds of slants when you get sun in the fourth house also. You can actually you can really stretch this meaning of sun in the fourth house, because it has to do with ancestry, and it has to do with things that are not hidden like the way it is in the eighth house, but it's very internal and underground. You can get shamans with this kind of a placement. You get these kinds of notations out of sun in the fourth house. Yeah, and then in terms of devotion, the sun will actually do well here too, because of that stability and reliability that's related to the sun. The sun in the fourth house is representing someone who has that inner stability and can direct their focus and attention to the object or the person of their devotion. So it can have this kind of a meaning too in the fourth house. But in general, the glitchiest part of the sun in the fourth house is that this is a intaking, inward moving house, and the sun is very much externalizing. The fourth house is trying to nurture. The sun commands everything to orbit around it. In a family dynamic, this becomes a little bit problematic. In the private sphere of life, there's a lot of negotiation and going back and forth with people. So the sun can become very overwhelming in the fourth house in these ways.
And then, but shouldn't it also play a big part in ego?
It could,
Considering it's
Would
the
I?
home, it's like,
I'm trying to see what would the sun need an ego for in the see, we can give the sun the ego slants more in the houses where it has to deal with other people or when it's in a public domain, because the ego in its healthiest form, it's how you have come to identify yourself, and then you make yourself an identification marker out in the world to be recognized that way. So when someone has an unhealthy ego, they have this self-concept of this self-perception of who I think I am and how I think you ought to be with me, which is not really based on reality. But in the fourth house, who are we? What do we need the ego for? I just feel like the sun, if we were to give it a negative slant in the fourth house, and people, and I'm saying this because within a family dynamic, no matter how much one tries to be egotistical, everyone knows them. Like they know you to the
yeah.
core. But I think you can be overwhelming. Like in a family dynamic, like that authoritative person in the house where their word has to be it. Their emotions, because this is a house of emotion. My emotions should precede everyone else's. It should come first. I matter the most. I am the most. If it wasn't for me, everyone else would die. So, and yeah, I guess we could attach that kind of a demeanor to someone who's egotistical, but it's very overwhelming in this very calm house. This is a watery house. This is the sun coming in and bringing it to its boiling point. So in that sense, it's creating a lot of unnecessary tension, and this is a person in a family who could be directing too much of everyone's care and emotion and devotion, everything to themselves. Like, I matter. This is a very overwhelming person in a family. No one's allowed to feel anything. Anytime someone feels something, there's that person, oh, you think your feelings are so bad? Let me tell you how bad I feel. It's just
Oh, okay. Yeah.
about them, Like these are very difficult people to negotiate with in one's life, especially when they're in your private sphere of life where you go to be happy. This is a house of happiness because the world can often be cruel, and our only refuge sometimes is our home. That's where a sense of happiness, calm, and peace is supposed to be. And then if you have a sun figure sitting in the house, that's just too authoritative and too overwhelming. You don't have a happy space externally or internally. Usually these are the people who feel like they're floundering in life. Like there's nowhere I can go to have an ounce of an experience that resembles happiness. This is very difficult. I think we all have experience of or know someone who's this way in their home life, and it just makes things very miserable. And here, like the sun's authority can become controlling, for example. That's what I'm saying. Like the way the sun can go wrong, like becoming egotistical, narcissistic, pompous, overwhelming, dictatorial, they're gonna happen. These words will relate to different parts of the house. I feel like in the fourth house, there's just a sense of overwhelm from too much authority in a place where there should be nurturance and softness. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I know people like that. Okay. So when you're looking at the actual fourth house,
Yeah.
this is your home, your place of residence, or your,
Yeah,
the
it's your
people.
property. Yeah, it's your private
Yeah.
property.
Oh, hence the private sphere.
Hence the private sphere. Yeah, it's yours. Yeah. But it's good for the private property aspect of it. Because I don't know, one of the greatest blessings a human being can have is to own private property. And what does that actually imply? It's that you own a piece of this earth where you are your own lord, the landlord. And that is the sun. So when the sun comes here, we could start interpreting it as the landlord, as the king of that piece of earth. So in this kind of way, the sun, we could give it a positive slant too when it comes to private property.
So does your fourth house also show where you're going to reside? Like I know a lot of people want to see if they're moving or
Mhm.
something.
Mhm.
Would you be looking at the fourth house for that?
Where someone lives, yes, you definitely, one of the factors gonna be the fourth house, yeah. And
Okay.
then if you want to see like, is this person gonna move overseas or something?
That's what I think a lot of
Okay.
people probably are like most people I talk, like a lot of people who go for readings and stuff,
Yeah,
they're always looking like, am I going to get a job overseas? Like, am I going to move overseas?
yeah,
But okay, so you could look like if you were doing a reading for someone,
yeah.
the fourth house would play a role in.
Let me give you a very basic indicator. The ruler of the fourth has gone to the 12th. So you see movement of home in very long distances where it would constitute as a foreign place.
And is that a permanent placement?
Then you have to look at the rest of the chart.
Oh, okay. 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 Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, if you want to see someone, the condition of their home life in general, the fourth house is definitely one of the
Isn't it also your happiness? Like your
yeah. It
Yeah.
is the place you resort to for your happiness. Even if we don't think about it in terms of a home, external world gets rough, you better know how to get to your own interiority to find happiness. And then another thing, where else can you feel happiness? It's all happening in your interiority. It's in your internal self. So yeah, the fourth house is very much related to happiness. Family brings us happiness when we have good family. It brings you a sense of love. The fourth house has a lot to do with love, as we'll see in the fifth house. We're going to start expressing our love and externalizing our love. But that devotional component in the fourth house is talking about a kind of a love that's you just hold it within your heart. Yeah.
just a side note, is
Yeah.
interiority a word or is it internal?
Pretty sure
Because I don't know.
it is.
Okay, it is.
I don't know. Do you want to
That's why-
check it out? Because I
I
said
don't.
a lot in this video.
I know. That's why I was like, I don't know if that's, but I could be wrong.
I'm
You're the writer.
pretty sure it is a word.
Okay, you would know more than me
Okay, we
because
want to
I'm
check it for a second
in.
because I don't
What
know
did you?
interiority.
Oh yeah, yeah, it's a
Yeah,
word.
right, right, and
Yeah,
yeah,
the quality of being interior or inward.
yeah,
Never used that.
yeah.
Interesting.
which
I've
is-
been like I go like it's internal, but
yeah,
I've never. Yeah, you learn something new every day.
yeah, because
English,
it's a space,
English,
right?
English 101.
There's so many words bound to come up against words we don't know, but yeah, it's the house's inward is internal, but the interiority because it's a space. The fourth house is
Okay, yeah,
talking
yeah,
about
yeah.
a space.
Yeah,
That's
like
why I'm keep-
exteriority. Because I've heard exterior. Yeah, okay, I
Yeah,
get it.
yeah. Same thing on the flip end.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that would pretty much be the fourth house, unless if you have something to say about it or something that comes to your mind.
No, I think I'm good.
No, looking all good.
No,
Okay.
I mean it's exactly. It's like if you have your son
Yeah.
there and it's your happiness, it's your home, it's all this
Yeah.
stuff, then you kind of went over the good and the bad of.
And then I mean, I was saying in the first house, the sun is literally the center. Everything's orbiting around it. Like symbolically, that's what the sun is. In the second house, because it's supporting other people, I've already said this, but I'm just going to go through it quickly. In the second house, it's starting to support other people. So it's kind of getting off tilted, off the center. In the third house, it becomes about itself. Like there is nothing really out there. In the fourth house, we're starting to see that we're supposed to be really nurturing other people. We can't make ourselves something as a center where other people should orbit us. That's a dysfunctional family, basically. So when you put a sun there, we can see problems are coming up. Now, in the fifth house, the sun is starting to understand, even though this is its own natural house, because the sign of Leo falls in here and then the sun falls in here. This is where we actually have to make ourselves about other people. This is where it's starting. By the time we get to the sixth house, we have to even serve other people. But in the fifth house, we're taking that love that was in the fourth house. Now we're supposed to express it. The fifth house is very much a house of expression and externalizing our interior self externally to let other people know what's happening within in terms of our feelings. This is why it's related to love. Actually, can I go quickly over the fifth house signification? So
Yeah.
I have an idea what we're talking about. Okay, so the fifth house is about expression towards others, expression in general, creativity, the act of creation. Love, children. Children are also an act of creation. Comprehension, intelligence, and scholarly learning. So it's this got a in-depth kind of a learning to it. So these are the significations of the fifth house. The sun becomes a little bit more apt in the fifth house because the sun is an externalizing agent, entity, field of interaction, and the fifth house is trying to express itself. So again, it's taking the internal feelings and telling someone, I love you. I want to be with you. It's having the ability to do this now. And when we talk about that aspect of the fifth house, which has to do about knowledge, for example, or about scholarly knowledge, the light is about illumination. If you actually think about the core concept of what knowledge means is to have certain things illuminated and known. So the sun becomes a very blessed planet in that sense in the fifth house. However, the sun is, when we go back to that concept of love, can become overwhelming here too authoritative with that expression of love and that dynamic of having romance, which romance kind of implies this like a back and forth, also almost has a sense of play to it. You don't want an authoritative figure of the like dictating what the pace should be and how it ought to be, or you don't want to express too much of your internal to your beloved. You might intimidate them, scare them off. So that's why the sun comes to be a little bit problematic. And then the
Isn't that what happened with Chaya?
the Chaya was a stand-in wife.
Yeah, the stand-in, but it was because it was overbearing and too much.
Yeah, so the wife of Surya, Sanjana, she was completely overwhelmed by the sun's light and power and just overwhelmed, and she had to escape, right? So yeah, this is like a case of sun in the fifth house. This is exactly what could happen. The person is just like, oh my God, this is just too much. I can't do it, you know?
So we all may be, anyone with it in the fifth house may be a Sanjana.
Sun in the fifth?
Yeah.
I have sun in the fifth.
Oh, interesting. So there you go. So maybe you're the problem. You just can't hack it.
Yeah, it could. Yeah. Because if you have sun in the fifth house, yes, it could indicate that your partner is overwhelming, but it could also indicate you're overwhelming.
Yeah,
You know?
which is interesting that you say that now, because looking at you from the outside, you would think that you're not all like lovey-dovey.
I'm super lovey-dovey.
But that I know, so that's what I'm saying. So
and then one way to know, for example, are you that person or your person is that person in the fifth house, is to look at, for example, where has the ruler of the fifth gone. Yeah, so sun can burn out the significations of the fifth house when it comes to love and romance. And I was explaining sun by itself is a Sattvic planet, but it's considered a mild malefic because of its heat and of its light. It can just overwhelm things. And this house, when we're talking about expressing our internal feelings to other people, we can't overwhelm other people, and the sun can do that here. And when it comes to children, it has generally has been said that the sun can burn out the signification of children. And
meaning what? Like you wouldn't have children?
No, I think, some people have a hard time letting nature take its course. Like, I must get pregnant and I must do it this year. They're putting their authoritative stamp on it. Like, we have been trying for the past year and it's not happening. We have to get hormone therapy. We have to get pregnant now. It's bringing a sense of authority to a house again that does have some play in it. So it starts to burn the significations of these things, and you try too hard. You can drain, you might have the children, but you're draining your partner because that demand that's there, that this must happen, for example, that joy that's supposed to come out of the fifth house, you're burning it out. You might have a child, but by the end of this whole process that you have commanded to come and to be in place, you've burnt out your romance with your significant other,
Oh, because it puts so much pressure and stress on the relationship. And
yes, we're supposed to love our children, but there are parents that just go through so much hardship in terms of having a child that by the time that child comes to this world, they're exhausted. They're just like, you know, this is a very like a love, it's a love house. Love, 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 love house, you know? So it's the sun is just bringing so much pressure in the fifth house that is killing the love. Same with the creative aspect of thing. Anyone who's a creative, you don't command the muse to come and be like, give it to me now so I can create. You're supposed to go with the flow, you know, you show up every day, you do your part, you play, and sometimes the muse plays back with you, and then you just get into the flow of creativity. The sun can kill it here because it's commanding that I must create. So these kinds of things, we can see why the sun would burn out the significations of the meanings that are connected to the fifth house.
So it's too much pressure, no matter what. It's talking about love, marriage, or children, creativity.
Yeah. Yes.
It's your own self pressure or self expectation, or
yes. Whether this is because this is in a person chart, they're the ones who are doing it, or their partner is the one who's doing it, depending where the ruler has gone and the rest of the dynamic of the chart. But yeah, they are killing the romance. They are killing the romance for having children. They are overburdening the children because they want romance. Just something's becoming overwhelming and burning that other part of this house out. Even with the intellect part of this chart, someone could place so much emphasis on the intellect as in like the kind of knowledge that comes out of this house. Remember how Einstein doesn't have this configuration, but just as a example, an incredible mind, a genius, but when it came to his love life, just one shade of gray, you know?
yeah.
Like not much happening there. So it's like so much focus on that aspect of life that you just, all the other significations are burnt out, you know? So it can start to talk about these kind of things. However, creativity is a form of expression. Love is a form of expression because it's talking about the dynamic between the lover and the beloved. Knowledge requires illumination. So if we have a functional sun in the fifth house and it's working itself out well because the rest of the chart is supported, you're going to get someone with immense intelligence, with immense knowledge, because it's a house of children and the sun is the father. You can have a good, reliable, loving father. This is a house of love. When a person loves, their partner always knows that they're loved. You know how some people have to play guessing game, like, does he love me? Does she love me? But why? I don't even know, because they don't ever express themselves. Sun in the fifth house, they might overexpress it, but you will know that you're loved. They'll express it. So with creativity too, it's creativity is not a wishy-washy thing either. I was just saying, for example, with the concept of the muse, you have to show up every day, like reliable and steady and regular, just like the way the sun is. You show up to do the work. Some days you produce shit, other days gems fall out of your fingertips, out of your paintbrush, whatever it is that you do. So the sun can also make someone very sturdy in their creative process because they always will show up. But this is a very functional sun. That means like the ruler of it is in good condition. All of these things, the conjunctions, the entire configuration of the chart is working out. If it's not, we're going to start seeing that mild malefic face of the sun.
Okay, and obviously aspects and all that, and conjunctions and all that.
Those are all the configuration. The subcharts also come into play, you know, but assuming it's good, it's doing good to excellent, we're not going to give the sun that signification of acting like a mild malefic burning out the fifth house. But if it's weak, then yeah, that's exactly what it's doing. And you know, when you think about the sun in general, Hafiz has a lot of poems where he talks about how the sun gives without asking for anything. It's just is. It just gives. When a sun is in a poor condition in a chart, that's why I guess that egotistical, pompous, narcissistic whole thing, it just feels its own self-importance too much, or it feels so insignificant that it needs to play itself out that way. This is when the sun's becoming that mild malefic. But if the sun is dignified at any point or any place of the chart, the sun's going to show as sattvic. And the sun, Surya, is beautiful. So you're going to see a beautiful aspect of that person. Yeah. It's generative, it's life-giving, it's life-supporting, it's not life-denying. But when it's dysfunctional, it starts to become life-denying, like burn you and disfigure you and that aspect of the life. Yeah.
So it could also be that helicopter parent here? Or is it more the actual procreation?
It's more I use the helicopter parent in the 4th house because it's the house of nurturance, right?
Okay.
That's how the parent is showing their care. Like, I care because I want you to win. And the child's like, I just want to be happy, you know? But in the 5th house is not, it's talking about the expression of love. So a good father here, or a good father archetype here, or father figure, would be a person who would let their child knows that they love them. But that nurturing aspect, socialization aspect of it is coming from the 4th house.
This is more the procreating, the creating.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you want your children to know that they're loved because there's an expression of it. You know, an expression of love in the 5th house, people always want to make direct connections. It's very healthy for children to see their parents kiss and hug and be affectionate and intimate. This is actually one of the ways, because we always think, I didn't receive care directly and I wasn't and I didn't get, but as children, and if we observe them, they're very observant. This is how they're actually learning about everything. So a lot of times they get their lessons of what it means to love and to be loved by watching the interaction and the romance between their parents. The sun here is expressive. It can become expressive about their love to their partner, to their spouse. So the child who's also in the 5th house is learning about that affection and that expression of love, which is so important in the 5th house. And if the parents love each other, is more likely that the child feels loved when the two parents are at conflict and the child feels like the parents don't love each other. On some level, we know we're the product of their emotion, so we don't feel loved. So if we actually sit and think about these things deeply, these houses are saying so much more than just the surface symbol connection and the way we just mix them up, meld them up to get a meaning out of it. It has a lot of depth.
Which can explain a lot of dysfunctional children in today's, culturally, a lot of cultures do not express that, right?
No.
Just in cultural norms, it's not really expressed between parents.
Yeah.
Like, you may not grow up seeing your parents do that or behave that way.
Yeah.
But it does make a lot of sense that, if you're also growing up seeing your parents constantly fighting and miserable, I guess you put it on yourself too, right?
Yeah, at some point you're gonna grow up and get to that age where you're like how the hell did I get here? Because at some point we start to understand that we are the product of their interaction. And it happens pre-teens. This idea starts to come around that time. And then we have a lifetime to internalize it. And hence why a lot of people start therapy in their 30s and 40s. It's just trying to untangle all the stuff that got entrenched. And then we go to therapy generally because we come to be in relationships and we see that, oh my God, I have so much problem expressing my love, receiving love, accepting it, being intimate. That's how I got conditioned inside, you know? Yeah, this aspect of the chart, which has to do with the 3rd house, 4th, and 5th, which is the private sphere of life. When people end up in later years of life in therapy, they're pretty much talking about these 3 houses, you know?
Oh, okay.
And then the outcome of it is like, why is the 7th house and the 10th house not working? So you go to a therapist and you're like, why is my marriage and my relationship, the 7th house, is not working, and my career, I have such a difficult time to figure out what's happened. With the therapist or the counselor is going to do, they're going to retrack you back to the third, 4th, and 5th house to help you figure out why you have such a disconnect in the 7th house, why you feel so confused in the matters of the 10th house, your career.
Oh, so have you done that? I'm guessing you've done that with people.
Yes.
When you've done readings.
Yeah, and it happens very naturally, you know, it's like just a little bit of probing. People will lead the way back to the 3rd, 4th, and 5th. You know, like the 3rd house has to do with siblings and your skill sets and what you got to learn at those very early stages. The 4th house is huge, like in terms of family life and that safe space that you're supposed to have and be happy and grow. What happened there? And then the 5th house, so much problems with love and expression. The 4th and the 5th come to affect the 7th house tremendously, and the 1st house, the house of the self. Obviously, the self is a therapy.
So I wonder if that's why, like, a child grows up, like later in life, if they had kind of non-loving parents or grew up around that, they'll almost overcompensate in their own relationships.
Yeah, sometimes
like I said, the ones that become too needy,
yeah,
or too clingy.
Yeah, you know, psychologists today talk about attachment styles and love styles and love languages. Well, they're talking about the 4th and the 5th house. If we were to take these psychological theories and plug them into a house, is literally the 4th and the 5th house. Because your attachment styles, your 4th house, and your love language and your style of loving someone, ways of loving is the 5th house. And it's basically what you learn. It's what you internalize is how you do it now.
That'd be a really good video.
Yeah.
I never thought of it that way, but yeah, like that's what you hear. And I mean, everybody knows somebody, if not themselves, that's in therapy somewhere. But it's interesting how when you do it in a reading, you can actually understand it differently, right? Like you're not just sitting on a couch and being like, tell me about your childhood.
I'm listening to you. Yeah.
If you're doing a reading with someone, they can basically, like, they may come in and be like, oh, exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
My marriage is miserable. My job is miserable, blah, blah, blah. And a typical therapist that you're paying like $250 an hour will be like, lie down and tell me about what your child, tell me about your mother wound or your whatever. But you could actually kind of break it down where it's maybe more logical. Like, because a lot of times when people go to therapy, I mean, we've all been to therapy at some point, I'm sure. Nothing to be ashamed of. But I think your average person has been to therapy. But the typical therapy is, you know, you're working through all your emotions and letting things go. But I think from your reading, it's more like almost like people want to understand why, right? So you're probably, from a reading perspective, now that you've talked about the connection between these houses, like, why do I have a problem with my sibling or my spouse or whatever? More than just the therapist being like, talk it out and let it go. Most people, I think, are wanting to know why. And so you're able, from a reading perspective, able to explain to me or whoever, like, why these things are affecting these parts of your life.
Yes, that's a component. There's another thing too that's very beautiful about astrology in this process. This doesn't happen so much in one-time readings. You're just reading someone's chart and addressing what's of concern to them. But in the counseling sessions, I always have the person's chart. So their blueprints is their own reference, and to just have a visual, because sometimes you talk about certain things, especially with emotion, they're kind of abstract. They happen in times that no longer exist. So you're talking about abstract time and abstraction of events and time in forms of memory. But when you have the chart as a blueprint, as a reference point too, it does something magical, even visually. Point out more on this part of the chart. This is related to this, what you just said. So just making those reference points too, it makes an experience tangible in a meaningful way. And then sometimes in the preceding sessions, the person can actually visually point to that. They can actually hold the chart in their mind. It does something very magical, and it's very therapeutic in itself.
Yeah.
Things out. Yeah.
Because it's like you said, it's almost, you get tangible. When you go to regular therapy, you just are told kind of to let go and to accept and to move on, but you don't ever really get an answer.
Yes. And you also,
or an understanding.
And you're also given the clients the privilege of note-taking, because when you go to a medicalized therapist, you're talking and they're taking notes. It's as if they're taking your memory and they're keeping it. And they're the one who have the privilege to refer back to your memories to make the connections. But when the chart's open in front of both of you, it's like you're both simultaneously note-taking. You're designating certain memories to certain parts of the chart. So you both have a reference point. It creates a very equal and a reciprocal dynamic between the counselor and the counselee, the person who's receiving the counseling.
Yeah, so it's actually a better way of dealing with issues, I would think.
For some people it works better, and some people just want to like let the memories out and do it that way. But I feel that people who gravitate to this form of counseling, they want the interaction, and that's it's a very transparent actually playing fields between the two people trying to unknot and untangle these parts of life.
But yeah, I think that would be a good video topic one of these days.
Yeah, no, I would love to talk about that. Yeah, it's very, very, very therapeutic. Like, I had one client, she had created a whole color coding for different things that will go into different houses. To me, it was just for her own personal thing, and it worked for her because it just gives you a map of yourself that is so distinct, and it's a constant because it's your birth chart. And then just to be able to refer to this is very, very therapeutic.
Yeah, and it's something they can keep with them and refer back to, I'm guessing, right? Like they can just,
It's very cool. I think you have to go.
Oh, yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we didn't get to all of the houses, but
that's totally cool. So we'll do the next one, however far we get next time. Okay, so let me wrap this up and then we'll continue with the 6th house onward.
But the 6th house, you're going to want to merge into this, no?
I don't know, we'll see. All right, so that's it for now. We'll be back soon to talk about 6th house till we get to the 12th. Well, that is sun in these houses. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you. On the journey of the sun.
The journey of the sun. Much love. Till next time.